Well, I had this morning, I went out to do an errand and I had my Dodger shirt on and my giant mask on. And people were very confused looking at me.
I was gonna say, Roy, hi everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see you all this morning. Sorry that we're a couple minutes late getting going. Welcome to everybody who's watching us on Facebook Live, on YouTube. We'll go ahead and get started just in the interest of time. But a question that I sometimes get from folks is, Rabbi, why did they build the temple in Koreatown? And I usually chuckle and share with them that, well, it wasn't Koreatown in 1929, right? It was the western frontier of Los Angeles. In fact, so for those who don't know, Western Avenue, which is just west of the temple, called Western Avenue because that was more or less the western edge of civilization. There's also an Eastern Avenue on the other side of town. And the neighborhood has changed a whole lot in 91 years. And absolutely now is Koreatown, which maybe we'll get to this in the conversation, Steve, but I think in some ways is actually a misnomer because it connotes this idea that everybody that lives in Koreatown is Korean, which from a demographic standpoint, we know is actually not even close to the case, right? So maybe we'll get to that in our conversation, but it's become Koreatown and all that entails. And I think that that's poetic, actually. And I think it's poetic because the more that I've come to learn about our Korean brothers and sisters in the past decade, the more similarities I see in our stories and in the values that we have and in the way that we approach life and the world and our communities. There's about 600,000 Koreans in LA, something like that. There's about 600,000 Jews in Los Angeles. Very similar stories. I think the Korean American immigrant story is probably about a generation and a half or so, behind kind of where the Jewish American immigrant story is. But this idea of prioritizing, in many cases, education, small business, family, community. And about a decade ago, when we were really beginning the redevelopment of what's now the Glazer campus, the only thing I knew about Korean culture and community was that I liked Korean barbecue, and I'd had this thing called bibimbap once, and that was it. And I was introduced to an amazing organization, KYCC, the Koreatown Youth and Community Center, which happens to be based across the street from our campus and directly across from the KHEIR Center. Introduced to the amazing folks there, introduced to Jang Ho-sung, who kind of steers the ship over there, I suppose you could say. And for the last decade, KYCC has been our guide and my guide in becoming much more deeply involved and engaged in the Koreatown community. And our relationship with KYCC has become incredibly meaningful and developed very, very quickly. I think in part because of this sort of shared view of community and of the neighborhood. And so they've really, really guided us in thinking about so much of, again, the redevelopment of our campus, but also how we connect and weave everything that the Glazer campus is into the fabric of the broader community. And that's really, really a testament to the beautiful relationship that we've built with them. KYCC is an amazing organization we're going to learn a bunch about today. 45 years old, I believe, this year. Started, as the name reflects, as an after-school program for Korean immigrant families. Again, something very similar to what was created in Jewish community, in federations, in Jewish community centers, as new Jewish immigrants were coming over a century or so ago. But in the last nearly half century has evolved into so much more, both in terms of the programs they offer, the services they offer, and particularly in the last 30 years in the wake of the riots, also dramatically expanding to not simply be an organization that serves the Korean community, but that serves the broader Koreatown and broader Los Angeles community. So I'm thrilled to have Steve Kang with us today. Steve, who I had the pleasure of meeting, I don't know when that lunch was, Steve, where I think I had bibimbap, maybe 2 years ago, something like that. Steve is the, get this right, the Director of External Affairs, is that right, for KYCC? and has done a lot to really engage KYCC more in the broader community. It's been incredibly helpful to us at the KHEIR Center, introducing us to particularly Korean media and getting us more out there and known, so that we're not the best kept secret in the neighborhood, because we don't want to be that. So Steve, thank you for being with us. I'm going to unmute you. Hopefully this works. There we go. Morning. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
So let's maybe start with a little bit. I gave it just a little bit, which is the extent really of that I'm qualified to speak about KYCC, with kind of just the global picture of, what is KYCC for those who aren't familiar, and what do you guys do?
So as you mentioned, I think you gave a glowing introduction about our agency. So thank you so much. And we love working with the KHEIR Center as well as the Temple. So we were founded in 1975. So now everybody knows us as Koreatown Youth and Community Center, for KYCC in short. So we're a nonprofit based directly across from the KHEIR Center in Koreatown, providing a comprehensive array of social services. So in the beginning, we were just focusing on helping at-risk youth in terms of substance abuse and anti-gang related activities. But now our spectrum of services have evolved with the community. So first, in early 2000, the K in our name actually changed from Korean to Koreatown to reflect that diversity that the rabbi mentioned earlier. So we not only serve Korean Americans, but also Latinos and everybody else who reside in the greater Koreatown area. And some of our services go beyond that, and we do service throughout the county of Los Angeles. So some of our main core services include our youth services, which is from our founding, mental health counseling, environmental services, where if you were to call the city to, hey, can you plant a tree in front of my home or business, our crew actually goes out to your place of address within our boundary, as well as South LA, and as well as graffiti removal. And another core unit is our community economic development, which provides technical assistance to small businesses, as well as providing free tax prep services for low-income families. And we do so much more.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about the VITA program? Because it's amazing.
Sure.
Am I right? You guys do more free tax returns than anybody else in the country, or something like that?
We're trying to get there.
Yeah,
we're trying to get there. We're second largest in the state of California.
That's pretty
We're
good.
the largest in Southern California. So we lead a collaborative of about 17 organizations throughout the county of Los Angeles, where we do process over 15,000 households annually in terms of tax returns. So currently we have processed about 12,000 this year. It's a little bit lower because of COVID, but we do provide a tremendous amount of tax prep services. And that is in partnership with these agencies, as well as all the mainstream and local ethnic banks and the mayor's office as well.
And am I right that you guys also have a few affordable housing units?
Yes, we also manage 8 different affordable housing units throughout Koreatown. That's about 209 units. Half of them are Section 8, and then the other half is a mixture of homeless housing or other low income.
And do those facilities pair services with housing? Is there staff on site or it's just an apartment building?
Correct. So majority of our housing on the ground floor, just like some of the other nonprofits, we do have space that provides sort of wraparound services that whether it's the counseling or the youth services or food and different types. And we're trying to diversify that. And although our headquarters is located directly across from KHEIR, we are spread out in 9 different locations.
Yeah, so for those who have either volunteered with or been a part of our Tuesday mobile food pantry program, which was the initial beginning of the mobile food pantry program, we're at KYCC's Menlo facility serving their residents there, which has been a really, really meaningful.
Yes, and I want to thank you guys for your tremendous support, especially during COVID. And I think the KHEIR, our collaborative and our partnership helped deliver over 2,000 bags to some of our low-income families.
Lizzie's reminding me that we also have some volunteers who started tutoring, after-school tutoring at Menlo, which
Correct.
is also
And the
really, really
basketball,
awesome.
which took off
Right, we're doing
before
basketball. Yeah.
COVID.
So for those also who know, and back to this idea that I shared earlier about really wanting the Glazer campus to be something that's woven into the fabric of the community. The roof of our parking structure, the length of the block, it's about 25,000 square feet, is a sports complex. And Koreatown's a neighborhood with very little green space, very little park space. It took us, the better part of 3.5 years to figure it out, but finally we're thrilled to have a after school and evening basketball clinic, basketball league with some of KYCC's families up there on the rooftop, which is really, really wonderful as well. Steve, you mentioned COVID, which I think is the logical kind of next question, which is how has this now 4 months in pandemic that we're all living through, that is radically changing life, how has it changed the myriad service offerings that you guys have? And
Yeah, so I'm sure COVID has impacted everybody around the globe, but for KYCC, it really impacted our in-person services because we are serving more linguistically isolated communities within Los Angeles. Many of them don't have access to computers or Wi-Fi or internet services. So, and many of them rely on in-person services because of the language barrier. So that has proven to be a major impediment and challenge for us moving forward. But because of COVID and health and safety of our staff and volunteer is our first priority. So we have severely curtailed in-person services. And now we have slowly opened up in-person services like the tax prep, but those are appointment only. And we are really encouraging all of our clients and youth to utilize virtual or remote services. And thankfully, a lot of our government partners are providing, whether it's like laptops or tablets or free Wi-Fi or internet services at home. So we are trying to troubleshoot those folks who don't have those types of services.
Wait, so say it again, because that's amazing, especially given some of the conversations we've had with other collaborators in terms of the challenges in connecting virtually with clients who may or may not have the technological resources to do that. So you're saying there are government subsidies programs that are helping people get technology right now?
Correct. For example, LAUSD, the local unified school district, they are providing whether it's laptops or Chromebooks or tablets to all of their students that do not have them. And wireless companies, I believe Verizon is one of them, they are offering free internet services at home for low-income families, as well as AT&T and other service carriers.
Well, it's
And
huge.
then, yeah, I think that's huge. And if there are families that do not meet those criteria, they can reach out to us, and we can provide them with those types of resources as well.
It's huge because I think that one of the big gaps is that, this is inconvenient for everyone, but some of us have great broadband and technology and are able to connect in ways that others who really, need to be connected may not have those same resources, even if they do have a smartphone,
Definitely.
which so many folks have. Has all of this, or this crisis, has it highlighted or created any new areas that you think either you are already addressing or need to be addressed? I think sometimes
Definitely.
these sorts of things have the tendency to kind of uncover or put a spotlight on different needs or new needs.
Yeah. First, I think when the pandemic started, all the government agencies at all levels, they rushed to pass different legislation and different aid packages to help small businesses or residents, whether with eviction or all types of resources. However, many of these like disaster loans or paycheck protection and unemployment insurance, they were designed for more of the English-speaking audience, more so than some of the linguistically challenged or low-income families. So this crisis really highlighted the government's inability to kind of address all layers of our diverse population. For example, many people have applied for unemployment insurance through EDD because that's available to everybody. However, many people who do not speak English or Spanish or some of the other Asian languages that they had, Chinese, for example, but they didn't have a Korean language assistance line or like a translated website. So that posed a huge problem for this 600,000 strong community, although not everybody needs Korean translation. So we sort of pivoted a lot of our services to provide in-language services, people applying for EDD, SBA disaster loans, Paycheck Protection Program, and other types of resources during the pandemic. And I think that has really highlighted the need for in-language services at all levels of government. And also food insecurity really popped up with a lot of vulnerable seniors and low-income families. That's, thanks to your partnership, I think we've been successful at delivering meals and food packages to folks, but that has really highlighted pockets of the population that are really struggling to meet ends meet.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to your few examples, especially with unemployment and the EDD and SBA loans and the PPP program. Are you seeing a significant number of sort of small business owners and family-owned businesses that are really, because I know particularly the restaurants across the city, but I know particularly in Koreatown, have been hit really, really hard. Are you seeing a lot of folks coming in looking for help in navigating, what's next for them?
Yeah, I think that's been one of our biggest changes pre-COVID and post-COVID, where we're seeing a larger number of small business owners coming into KYCC asking for our help in navigating the different kinds of guidelines and procedures related to all of these aid packages. Because even for all of us who are on this call, it's hard to follow all of the changes. It's really daily. Like the SBA disaster loan, that has evolved from day one till now in terms of who can apply, what are all the different types of metrics and prerequisites. So it is very complicated, even for the fluent English speaker, let alone an immigrant population. So I think we've seen a larger number of businesses. So the positive side is that we've cultivated a relationship with many of our local business establishments in the community. And that is much stronger today than pre-COVID.
So that sort of gets to maybe my next question, which is just, are you seeing kind of any shifts or changes in who you're serving? Are you seeing any sort of a new population emerge that's coming to KYCC looking for help and assistance that 6 months ago, probably wouldn't have?
Yes, so we're seeing a larger number of undocumented as well as DACA. We did service some of that population group, but because of the sensitivity around law enforcement and fear about deportation and other things, they didn't really solicit a lot of our services. However, they've come out. I believe we created that trust with that pockets of the population. And also the small business community. They're coming out in larger numbers asking for assistance.
So in meeting these increased need, in meeting a broader spectrum of kinds of folks and clients who are coming to help, what are the biggest challenges that you guys are facing right now?
I think we're trying to assess funding in terms of meeting all of these needs, because the need is great. However, as you guys can imagine with the daily headlines, a lot of the government funding streams have cut or severely rerouted to other sectors because, whether it's the state government or the federal or the local, they have a huge budget deficit. So we're okay now, but looking into the next fiscal year, into 2021, how can we keep up with the pace or the increased volume of clients with the allocation that we have received thus far? And we're hoping none of it gets cut.
Right. How do we do more with the same?
Exactly.
And God forbid have to do more with less, which I think is a challenge that just in these uncertain economic times, particularly, also we're all trying to face. Well, I know that Jeff has patiently had a hand up for a few minutes. So I'm going to open it up to others for questions. We can kind of keep the conversation going. Jeff, I'll unmute you.
Okay, thank you. You know, being that Los Angeles has developed into a hotbed of COVID-19, within this relatively isolated community, what have you seen in the habits of the population in the sense of, do they follow guidelines? Do they wear masks? What have you seen as the acceptance of guidelines, and has the population incidence been affected by whether they choose to follow your guidelines or not? And with a diverse population that's fearful of law enforcement, fearful of hospitals, fearful of authority, you know, it is one of the issues which kind of embeds the disease in a sense, because they're not maximizing their opportunity at social distancing. And, you know, I just don't know the character of the group of people that you're dealing with and what the history is of Koreatown with this accelerated resurgence of this disease. How are they being trained? Is there communication? Is there PPD? Is there the issues that are necessary to support your population and help them avoid the incidents rising?
Great question, Jeff. I'll also add, Steve, to Jeff's question, just thinking about what you shared earlier about government issues, also, again, a language barrier in many cases, right? In communicating guidelines and such.
Sure. So thank you so much for your question. Thankfully, for the vast majority of the Koreatown population, I believe that people do adhere to all the local and federal guidelines in terms of mask, social distancing, and all of that. I think that stems from, especially speaking for the Korean American aspect, is that South Korea has become a sort of a global role model for stopping COVID-19, where I think the South Korean government and society has really demonstrated an effective measures, whether they were the first to kind of suggest the drive-through testing model and the whole mask. And I think Korean Americans are used to wearing masks, so when they're sick. So I think the adaptation to the mask culture was a lot smoother for the Korean American population. And because there were so many Koreans wearing masks within the community, I think that encouraged other stakeholders, whether the Latino community or other communities within the Koreatown community, to follow and adhere to all the local guidelines. So I think for the most part, that's been very successful. And for KYCC, we haven't had anybody kind of that refused to wear masks or follow any of the local guidelines. So we're blessed in that aspect. So I think for the most part, the community has been adhering to all the guidelines fairly well. I mean, there's always going to be people who, you know, are exception to that, but for the most part, it's been very good.
One thing that I've noticed, and this may be just my own impression, is that both the Latino population and the Asian population, be it Korean or other, has a tremendous respect for their seniors, their adults, and their parenthood. And that is absent in the behavior of the youth in America. The lack of concern about spreading the disease to their family, friends, grandparents, etc., would not be seen in an Asian culture for the most part, at least from my experience in observing the reactions of people in their families. And I think that may be a major element to why they have successfully dealt with social isolations and the reasons for it, to stem the spread and keep their families intact. That's just an opinion that I have observed. I may be
No, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. Gary, I know you had your hand up, but I see you on the phone now. So we'll come back to you in just a second. Anybody else with a question? You can either type it in the chat, you can do a virtual hand raise, a real hand raise, whatever works best for you. Lizzie, I know you have a burning question, I'm sure. Yeah,
I can, I'm unmuting. Well, it's such an amazing relationship and such a delight for the KARSH team and KYCC for all that we do to collaborate together. So I love any chance to be hearing more from the KYCC team and learning from the client experience. I am always, I think, we spoke a little bit about the youth programs, and certainly basketball is one of many youth programs that you operate. And I feel like KYCC has really amazing invested relationships with young people in the community. And I was curious, we got in a little bit already to what are the lessons and reflections you're hearing from the families that you serve. And I was wondering if there are any insights or common threads that you're hearing specifically from the experience of young people, whether that's college students whose education has shifted virtual, I guess all students whose education has shifted virtual, but also resources that are new or particularly effective for families with children dealing with the new state of the world in COVID times, specifically to the Koreatown youth.
Sure. A couple things. We've been highlighting and emphasizing to our youth to adhere to all the guidelines. Like the comment from Jeff, I think there's young people who feel invincible because they're younger, they're healthier, so they feel that they can, battle the disease even if they're infected with COVID-19. However, we ask them to adhere to the mask, social distancing, all the different types of rules to ensure that they don't pass along the disease to other individuals in our community. And then B, what we've been really helping to navigate is for our youth that are going into college and also that are graduating from college. Because for a lot of them, they didn't have the graduation that we all sort of experienced in high school or college. So they're really missing out on that experience. But also for those who are graduating and seeking a job, the job market has become very challenging and difficult in many areas. So we've been helping them with different types of resources and helping them to navigate to different companies that are hiring and even within our agency as well. And also we've paired our youth with different mentors for those who are seeking to go to college, to helping them to navigate going to online classes and different types of the new normal that we have to face in the sort of the virtual space that we are in.
Okay, Gary and then Merle. Gary, I'll unmute you. Maybe not. There you go.
Okay, I'm there. So on KYCC, what is the structure of your board of directors vis-a-vis the community, the Korean community? How is that all organized? And then I have a follow-up question to that.
I'm going to interject, and with the part I left out of the early narrative was that the way I got initially connected to KYCC a decade ago was that one of their board members is a dedicated Temple member and helpful in leadership at the KARSH Center, and that's the little sliver of about your board I can share.
Sure. We do have a diverse array of board members. We do have sort of an e-board, which consists of the board president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. But we also have different types of board members ranging from corporate, like the gas company, to Hanmi Bank, the local Korean American bank out there. But we also have an African American member, and we also have Felicia, who's very well connected, Rosenfeld, who is very well connected to the Temple and KARSH. So we are also looking for additional board members to help increase our diversity in terms of the Latino population, as well as the African American population. But that's sort of our board composition. We have about 15 members currently, and they've been very robust in engaging with different community stakeholders and bringing different types of resources to our organization.
Okay, then I have a funding question overall of the organization. What percentage of your funding comes from government versus individual donors versus community foundations, et cetera?
Sure. We have surpassed $10 million in annual budget for next fiscal year. But to make it simply, if you divide the 10 million, 60% of our budget comes from government, and 30% of that, and 30 additional percent comes from foundational support. And the last 10% comes from special events, fundraising events like our annual concert, golf tournament, and as well as individual giving.
And on the foundation, is it the community type foundation like California Wellness or the California Foundation, as opposed to family foundations or whatever?
It's very diverse. We have all types, from family foundations to California Community Foundation, nationwide foundation. So it's very broad in terms of our foundational support.
Okay, thank you.
In case you couldn't tell, Gary's a development professional. Had to out you there. Lizzie?
One more. Steve, what's something that your team is looking at or maybe preparing to roll out or hoping to roll out that you're most excited about?
So I also manage our development team here at KYCC, and this year we couldn't hold our annual concert at Disney Hall in downtown. So we were sad about that. However, our new board president, Teddy Z, he has an entertainment background from Paramount. So he really wanted to hold a first virtual concert in the fall, like Thanksgiving time. So we are busy preparing for a virtual concert. We've never done it before. So, but we are super excited because yes, we're not seeing the artists in person, but with the virtual concert, we can invite everybody from around the globe. So once we have that locked in, we'll be sending invites to all of you guys as well.
Merle.
So for a couple of things. One, about your having virtual concerts. A lot of fundraisers here in Phoenix have become virtual fundraisers and have been really successful. So that's a great thing to see that you're doing. I really encourage it because I know that it's worked here. And Jeff, to make you feel a little bit better about the youth, I know that we have a lot of friends here in Phoenix, you know, and our daughter grew up here, and also in Los Angeles, and family all over New York. And I have to say that everyone's kids have been, if not only protective, and in some ways extremely overprotective about where they go and where they don't want us going, because at my age, we're considered elderly, which I don't feel elderly, but.
You're still a baby, Merle. And you know what that tells me? That tells me that it's a credit to the upbringing of your children and your grandchildren, that basic elements of ethics, values, and morality have been instilled. And
Right.
yet look at the population of 30s and 40 years olds who crowd the beaches without masks, who are responsible for this resurgence of disease.
And I was going to say that we have friends on the other side who don't think they need to wear a mask or don't think twice about going to rallies or whatever. And what I'm seeing is a lot of the younger, my friends' kids are trying to encourage their friends to behave. And I think that's something that I have to give them credit for, because it's disturbing to them that they can't be with their friends because their friends aren't behaving. I guess that's the best way I could say it. So.
That's there's all sorts of diversity in our populations, and this breaks down into good, bad, and indifferent. And unfortunately,
as do most
Right.
things in my opinion. So anybody else? Conscious of the time. All right. Well, Steve, thank you again for being so generous with your time today, and for just being such a good friend and partner to us at KHEIR and at the Temple. And I look forward to, when we can sit across the table from each other and catch up in real life.
Thank you. And lastly, we're really excited for the pavilion. We're seeing the construction progress on a daily basis. So
I was going to say, I was on campus for the first time in a very long time on Sunday morning for a few minutes, and got to see where we were in the construction process, and I was pretty impressed myself. It's going to be done before we know it.
Yeah.
I know Jung Ho has big plans for the pavilion. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.